Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast. Yes, we are back. We have had lots of technical difficulties as our lovely guest tonight has endured for the past couple weeks. A lot of schedule shifts as well. Cody is back to work full time. Thank goodness on that. But with that comes a lot of shifting around and just trying to get dates together. I'm going crazy with 2 tournaments going on, so it happens. But we're here tonight to talk about hockey. But first off, I want to bring our guest in. We have Owen Krebs today. He is a student at Robert Morris. He is one of our jack of all trades guys. He writes about the Penguins. He'll write about some other stuff once in a while. But welcome to the show for the first time.
Thank you very much. What else isn't completely gone crazy here in these past couple of months? So technical difficulties are the least of our concerns here. So we're glad to be back, and I'm glad to be here for the first time and ready to talk about some hockey today. But before then, some soccer too.
Yes. So today we had live sports come back in the Pittsburgh region, if you will. I've mentioned for the last couple of weeks we have had live sports coming back, with the National Women's Soccer League being the first league to come back. MLS, albeit I have thoughts about that, but that's for a different show. MLS has come back, and now the USL has come back. And unlike some other teams in the USL, the Pittsburgh Riverhounds did not get to play before everything kind of shut down due to COVID-19. The Riverhounds were kind of on a delayed start to the season. I don't think it had anything to do with the club. It was just kind of how the schedule worked out. But today they played their first match of 2020. They took on their kind of rival Louisville City FC. They built a brand spanking new stadium. It is absolutely gorgeous. This week they also announced that they have their brand for their women's soccer team that's going to happen next year. All the talk was about Louisville and Pittsburgh, the rivalry, though. And when you think of Pittsburgh sports, you think of rivalries with Philadelphia and Ohio teams and such like that. But for the Riverhounds, it is with the Union 2, formerly the Bethlehem Steel. They're an affiliate with the MLS Philadelphia Union. But over the last couple years, this rivalry with Louisville has just really kind of, I guess, taken off, if you will. They've met in the playoffs many times. The Riverhounds have been beaten in the playoffs by them many times. But today was a huge 3-1 victory. And to be quite honest with you, the Riverhounds kind of came out slow out of the gate. I don't know if it was fitness. I don't know if it was the heat. But I think it was about 2 or 3 minutes before halftime, Jordan Dover scored an absolute goal to tie it up. Early in the second half, Robbie Mertz scored. And I believe it was Anthony Velarde that also scored. And I have to give a shout out to Ropapa Mensah for just being absolutely unselfish today with his play. Excuse me. He was the reason that the Riverhounds scored those 2 goals in the second half with his passes. So big props to him. Riverhounds get a 3-1 victory. And I told Owen before the show started we would be remiss and mistaken if we didn't at least acknowledge the Riverhounds coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so
the
go
goals
ahead,
were from Jordan Dover, Robbie Mertz, and Anthony Velarde. I don't know if I'm saying those names right, but I just fact-checked you on that. And apparently, I'll just come out and say I don't know much about the Riverhounds, so I won't try and act as if I do. But apparently, a former Robert Morris University alumni scored his first ever goal in Lynn Family Stadium history, apparently. So.
Yep, Speedy Williams.
Speedy
Williams played at RMU, and he played for the U23 affiliate of the Riverhounds. It also should be mentioned that was their first ever game. It was Pittsburgh's first ever game nationally televised. They were on ESPN2 today. But we're here to talk about hockey, and hockey is indeed coming back. The NHL, the Players Association, and I have to give a huge shout out to all of the players associations throughout all of sports, whether it's the NWSL, MLS, NHL, NBA. They have all been really, really working hard for.
Yeah, most of them. MLB's had some issues.
MLB's Players Association has worked hard. It's the owners.
Everyone has worked hard to get back to sports in general, and sports weren't an essential service by any means, but they're definitely important to just people's well-being and, boosting the economy. Like, these franchises are absolutely like money making machines, and of course, just sports makes people happy and brings people together. And for the most part, like you said, like every players association has been working very hard to get past things, and we'll get into later. The NHL expanded the collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, for 6 years, and it was really kind of maybe fortunate, but also unfortunate the fact that it expired this year. Like no one knew there was going to be a global pandemic, but the fact that it did expire this year, everyone came to an agreement and was basically like, "Hey, let's just push this down. Let's just kick the can down a few more years, and let's worry about this later." And that's pretty much what the NHL and the NHLPA did in terms of like agreeing to the collective bargaining agreement and just getting things done, because hopefully this will never happen again. So.
Yeah, we can hope a lot of things that are happening right now definitely will not happen again. There are some interesting cases popping up of COVID in the NHL. Can you just walk us through that and what's going on right now? And then we'll get into
Yeah.
the actual action.
Yeah. A bunch of players have tested positive, as I wouldn't say necessarily expected, but it's inevitable that at least one player, a handful of players, were going to end up getting COVID. The NHL isn't officially in their hub city bubble lockdown thing that they have they are projected to be August 1st. Just yet, they are just now starting formal training camps as of this weekend. So players still were able to just go out and do whatever they want and go grocery shopping and do all that. They're not locked down yet. So when you see these cases coming out about how players have been getting COVID, it's not necessarily like the NHL and Hub City's fault. And I'm not saying it's the players' fault either. But as of right now, there's about like 25, 30 players that have gotten it. It's still unclear the official number. A member of the Penguins had it. We don't know who that is, but that was about a month ago, and they are obviously recovered from it. Just tonight, the Montreal Canadiens announced that 3 players had it, and the Penguins will obviously be playing them. And then I think one of the most noteworthy cases of COVID in the NHL came from Toronto Maple Leafs superstar Austin Matthews had it, and we're saying how like a Penguins player had it. A part of me wants to know who it was, but obviously I don't want to at the same point, because I don't want that's private information. Steve Simmons, he's a reporter out of Toronto. He reported that Austin Matthews had COVID, and a lot of people were really upset, including myself, were upset the fact that he pretty much gave out confidential information just for clout, and the fact that the alternate captain and one of the top players on the Leafs had it in Austin Matthews. So that's the only official player named that we know that had it, outside of other like former players like George Laraque had it, but they're all retired. So it's up in the air in terms of if players want to come back. We've seen a lot of players opt out. We've seen a lot of players be skeptical in terms of if they want to come back. A bunch of people have like family issues that are going on. There are exceptions in terms of going home during the hub city and leaving the hub city. I believe the only exceptions are if a family member dies or if there's a birth of a child, but then you would have to quarantine. So say it's Carey Price with the Montreal Canadiens, who is expecting a baby. His wife is expecting a baby. If he were to leave the hub city, he would have to quarantine when he got back in, so he wouldn't be able to play, and the Canadiens would have to go to their backup netminder. So it really is up in the air with what's going on. We do know that the NHL will be starting things up August 1st. Formal training camps have started now, and I believe it's the 26th is when teams are supposed to travel to the hub cities, which will be Toronto and Edmonton.
So, I was joking with you a little bit off the air about Toronto and Edmonton, and I think it's very, it's interesting. We don't talk about politics on this show,
yeah.
But with travel regulations and stuff that a lot of countries are doing, Toronto and Edmonton kind of make sense. It
Yeah.
really, really does.
Edmonton has had like no cases from the beginning, pretty much.
Canada is really, they're really getting it together when it comes to,
Mhm.
precautions for COVID-19. I think those are better places to have a tournament than, MLS
Mhm.
is having it in Orlando, Florida. So
That's a little.
so
Yeah.
we've got hub cities, we've got start dates, and
Yes.
we've got some players that might not see the benefit of going back. You kind of touched on
Yeah.
that for a little bit, but let's talk about the Penguins real quick. Who are the players that you think are going to benefit the most out of a tournament like this?
Jake Gensel is the first obvious thing. I joked with my family today. I was like, well, the coronavirus is just a hoax to get Jake Gensel back to the Penguins in the playoffs. No, but Jake Gensel will be healthy. That's phenomenal, and he tears it up in the playoffs. He's absolutely gonna, steal the show again, even if he is gonna be a little shaken up after the injury that he had, scoring a goal against Ottawa in the regular season. I really hope Patrick Marleau will benefit, considering the fact that he came to the Penguins to win a Stanley Cup. He obviously didn't know there was going to be a global pandemic and that the playoffs would be pushed back, but hey, he'll take a cup if he can get one, and I really hope the Penguins can get Marleau a cup, his first ever cup, and he's been in the league for decades now. And then I think the Penguins themselves have benefited from the fact that they have so much leadership and experience in the playoffs. You think of other teams that have made deep postseason runs consistently. Like obviously St. Louis did it last year, but they haven't consistently made a bunch of deep playoff runs. The Penguins are really like the only team that I think of. Boston is another one, but they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 2011. So, and then Chicago would be the other team I would think in that category as like a consistent playoff team that is up there. And then Chicago wouldn't have made the playoffs this year. So I think that's how the Penguins are going to really benefit from this tournament, because obviously nobody has ever been through this situation before, but the Penguins have been through two full seasons, back-to-back seasons of full four series in the playoffs and the World Cup of Hockey back in 2016. So, like for instance, Sidney Crosby, he's played a lot of hockey in his career, and I think like this is just going to be another challenge for him, in the fact that it'll prepare him for anything. And that prepared him for anything. I feel like he is prepared for anything, and I feel like this is anything. And I just hope the Penguins will be able to pull off another one here with the experience that they have.
I know we kind of jumped the gun there on the Penguins a little bit. There's a lot in your notes, of course, and I want to go back to those hub cities for a second. When me and Cody Flavel, of course, have talked on recent shows a lot, we've said all of this stuff could really just go out the window in a moment with bountiful amounts of positive tests and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we talked for a minute there about how Edmonton and Toronto are cities with less and less cases. How good of an idea do you think these hub cities are? Because I know in my soccer world, MLS has a hub city in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
NWSL has a hub city in Harriman, Utah. And in the USL, they're actually traveling. And albeit there are a lot more USL teams than there are NWSL and MLS, but still there's kind of an argument in that area of, well, they're traveling, so why can't we travel? Or they're in a hub city. Is that the better idea? So
Yeah.
what's just your opinion on these hub cities, and do you think they're going to work?
I don't think anything can like work in terms of no cases. There are going to be cases, and it's going to be there is going to be a team in these playoffs that will lose a star player to COVID. I don't know who it's going to be. One thing that is kind of, I mean, the NHL does this anyway, even when there isn't a global pandemic, is that they're like not even gonna list injuries at all. Like if a player gets injured with like a broken leg, they won't even tell the media at all, is apparently what they're going to do, because they don't want people to think that they have COVID. So they're not revealing any injuries in these playoffs. So Sidney Crosby could miss a game in the playoffs. It could have been a concussion. It could have been a broken leg. It could have been that he had COVID. We're never going to know until afterwards with this. But in terms of if I do like the idea of a hub city, I just think, I mean, it's going to get easier as it goes along because you'll have less teams. Um, but I really don't know how you can effectively uh, do this. Every player will be tested once a day, which will suck for the players because I don't know if you know how like they actually test for COVID. They stick the thing up your pretty much in your brain like a Q-tip, but it's disgusting and the players hate it. Connor Sherry was talking about how much he like dreaded like it, but if it keeps people safe, it is what it is. The thing that really is kind of interesting to me is the fact that the NHL is renting out hotels for the teams, and each team will have their own floor, which is very interesting to me in the fact that could you imagine you're technically spending the night in the same hotel as Claude Giroux if you're the Penguins. But while there's 4 hotels, and I have them up here right now, Hotel X will be where the Penguins will stay in Toronto. They'll be there with the Flyers, the Capitals, the Lightning, and the Bruins. So a bunch of rivals there. And then the Royal York will have the Hurricanes, Islanders, Maple Leafs, Blue Jackets, Panthers, Rangers, and Habs. And then in the West, the JW Marriott will have the Blues, Abs, Golden Knights, Stars, Oilers, and Predators. And then Sutton Place will have the Canucks, Flames, Jets, Wild, Coyotes, and Blackhawks. Another thing that I think would be interesting is like the fact that what if you're the Edmonton Oilers or the Toronto Maple Leafs or a player or a staff member on their team and you live in this city, but you're still not allowed to go anywhere. Like, what if you just want to see your kids like for a weekend, but you're not allowed, even if they are really close. So it'll be interesting. I don't know how you can officially like and safely go 100% without any COVID cases because it's going to happen. I think the NHL is doing a great job, and I know everyone hates Gary Bettman, but him and Bale Daly have done a great job in terms of getting the NHL back to play, and with the CBA and extending that. Draft lottery is a different subject, but I think the NHL has done a great job, and we'll have to see if they can continue to do it. So I don't know.
And speaking of that collective bargaining agreement, on July 6th, they came to an agreement, the NHL and the NHL Players Association. They voted and ratified a CBA. That CBA is going to last until 2026. So that's a long time. What's kind of break down the CBA for me? What's going on and what are the players getting that is a big thumbs up?
The big thumbs up is the Olympics. We don't know if it's official yet in the fact that the Olympics will be, or the NHL players will be allowed to participate in the Olympics yet, but it's all signs are pointing towards the case that will be the case that the NHL players will go back to the Olympics. I'm not a businessman. I really don't know much about like the collective bargaining, like the minutia of like how much money it is. The only things that you really need to know if you're an NHL fan is the fact that there will not be a lockout at least until 2026. Hopefully never ever again, but 2026 until 2026 there will confirm never be a lockout. The Olympics might come back, likely will, and the salary cap might have to stay as it is right now, which the players were in understanding of because the NHL is not making any money right now. Salary cap right now is $81.5 million. It'll be a little hard for some teams that had plans of the cap going up to adjust to that. I know the Penguins obviously have both Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry up this offseason as restricted free agents, so there'll be some tough decisions to make there. But I think the players and the general managers and the owners know that that's not the NHL's fault in terms of not making the salary cap increase. And then escrow this is the area where I like have no idea really what it comes to in terms of the business standpoint, but it's basically the players wanting to earn what money that they do make. I mean, Connor McDavid, his salary cap is $12.5 million, but he's not making all of that, even though that is a huge number. He's not making all of that, and I know people like always think like they just see the numbers, like, but there's a bunch of like there's taxes and things that go out of that. So The really important things to break down from the CBA is Olympics. Salary cap will probably have to stay the same, and no lockout until 2026 at least. So it's good that the NHL came to an agreement for this. And as we mentioned earlier, I think the players and the owners and Bill Daly and Gary Bettman are just really coming to terms like, hey, this is never going to happen again. We need to come together and come to an agreement now. And they did, and I'm very happy that the NHL, did this. So
Yeah, they certainly, buckled down and got it done, and they got everything done in time to have a realistic start date that's not too early, not too late for the NHL, and still business as usual for the NHL, and it all
mm-hmm.
needs to be pushed forward. The draft lottery happened. There was a lot of question marks around it, a lot of
Yeah.
confusion. I know I was confused, and I had you and Cody walk me through it. So I'm gonna have you do it again.
Okay. Yeah, I was confused when the NHL because Gary Bettman had like a press conference like a while back, and he explained like the NHL's return to play policy, and like the CBA and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, I'm on board. And then he got to the draft lottery, and I it just went over my head. It wasn't until the actual draft lottery where I understood what was happening pretty much. So there will be two draft lotteries. We're talking about the first one, obviously, the one that already happened. The second draft lottery will be to determine who got the first overall pick because we still don't know who got it. There was a 12.5% chance that the first overall pick, which will 100% be Alexis Lafreniere, who is in the same category as like an Austin Matthews type of player. He will be a great franchise level player, and he's a left winger too, so he's not even a center. So great level player. Also played for the same team, same junior team that Sidney Crosby did. So hey, we still don't know who got him or who will get him, and because we don't know who the first overall draft pick will be. There's a 12.5% chance that would have happened, and it did happen. And now there's also a 12.5% chance that the first 8 teams that are eliminated from the play-in round, and I know we really haven't discussed that yet, which is, it seems like forever ago when the NHL like announced their play-in plan. The first 8 teams that are eliminated from that will be eligible to get Lafreniere. For those of you that don't know, the NHL is having a 24-team playoff, which isn't technically the playoffs. They're starting with the play-in round, which the Penguins are annoyingly in, even though they finished 7th overall in the NHL. They will play the Montreal Canadiens, who are the 24th best team in the NHL. That's besides the point. What is important in terms of the draft lottery is that there's 16 teams in the play-in round. 8 will move on to the normal Stanley Cup playoffs and into Game 7 play. The teams that are eliminated in the best-of-5 series in the play-in round will have a shot to get Lafreniere in the first overall pick. Now, a lot of teams have traded their first overall pick in like trades during the deadline. The Penguins are one of them. And luckily, a bunch of general managers, including Jim Rutherford, are smart in the fact that they lottery protected those picks, which means that if the Penguins somehow lose to the Montreal Canadiens and get the first overall pick, that pick is not Minnesota's because we traded it to Minnesota in the Jason Zucker trade. Minnesota would get our 2021 first-round draft pick, and the Penguins would get the 2020 first overall pick, which would be Lafreniere. Hopefully that doesn't, but also does happen. I don't want the Penguins to lose the Canadiens, but hey, I would take Alexis Lafreniere. The teams that cannot get Lafreniere are the top 8 in the league, or top 4 in each conference, which are Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, and Tampa in the East, and then Vegas, St. Louis, Dallas, and Colorado in the West. Those teams cannot get Alexis Lafreniere. Only the first 8 teams that will be eliminated from the play-in round, which are either Edmonton, Chicago, Minnesota, Vancouver, Nashville, Arizona, Winnipeg, Calgary, Montreal, Pittsburgh, New York, Islanders and Rangers, Maple Leafs, Panthers, Hurricanes, and the Blue Jackets. So
that was certainly quite a mouthful.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are really like hoping that it's not the Oilers or the Penguins because these teams are obviously very good, and adding a superstar player and prospect to their organization would be a little bit unfair. Like Chicago and Montreal weren't going to make the playoffs in a normal year if we were able to play the remainder of the regular season. But hey, it could be the Maple Leafs that get them. It could be the Predators that get them. So we still don't know, and we also don't know. I don't think the NHL has revealed when the second draft lottery will be, but it'll be after the first round of the play-in round, which will be a while from now. Well, who knows, because the NHL is planning to have 5 or 6 games a day starting August 1st. So there'll be a lot of things to cover once we get to that. But
Where
yeah,
are
the
they
second,
airing them?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it's going to be local or if it's going to be NHL Network and like TSN and Sportsnet. They'll obviously have to air them because there's going to be no fans in the stands, and they are doing 5 or 6 games a day, so there's going to be games at like 1 p.m. So I really hope I'm not at work when the Penguins are playing, like in a game 7. So, the NHL's trying to have their cake and eat it too, in terms of they're trying to get this done, finish this season, and also have next season a full 82 game. Gary Bettman says he still wants to have a full 82 game season for next year. So we don't know how long this is gonna affect the season off in the future, because it's gonna slowly be pushed back year in, year out. So there's gonna be a lot of there's gonna be a domino effect in terms of what this season's gonna look like. So because Gary Bettman wants to have another 82 game season, so who knows?
This has been, it's not in our notes, but this has been a hot topic in sports like, soccer and football and baseball and whatnot. To you, whoever wins this tournament, are they going to have an asterisk
No,
next to their season?
absolutely. Yeah,
Tell me why.
a bunch of people have went through that, and as I'll probably be a hypocrite. I hopefully won't, in terms of like, if the Flyers win, I'll just be like, oh, it doesn't really count. But no, if the Penguins win, I would obviously say it wasn't. This year's Stanley Cup or Lombardi Trophy or NBA championship, whatever it is going to be one of the hardest to win ever. You have players that have opted out, that aren't on your team. You have players that have gotten sick with COVID. You have no fans in the stands, and you still won a cup. And if you're in the NHL, you would have went through 5 rounds to get there instead of a regular 4 without playing for a couple months. It's absolute. I feel like there should be an asterisk in terms of this one means more, because really, whoever wins the Stanley Cup, and even if it is Philadelphia, I'll tip my hat to them, in terms, because Philadelphia was having a really good season until this happened. So hopefully that kills their momentum. But still, whoever wins this year's Stanley Cup, I will absolutely tip their hat to. This is going to be a phenomenal achievement. Whoever does it, whoever gets to hoist the trophy, and it'll be sad though. One of like the greatest trophies or the greatest trophy to in all of sports to lift will be lifted in an empty arena this year. So it's going to be sad.
I had to give you a look there for the greatest
Oh,
trophy
it
there.
is
No,
the
I'm
greatest.
kidding.
You have
I
to
mean,
agree.
it
In
is.
terms of like overall looks, the Stanley Cup is beautiful, and it's
Yeah.
huge. Like, and there's only one of it too. There's a replica one in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but like, you're just pumping out Lombardi Trophy out of Lombardi Trophy. Like, they're not special anymore. This same Stanley Cup was donated by like the Duke of, shoot, what was his name? He was like the Sir Stanley of, I don't know. He was like a Canadian, like, I don't know. It was, there's like some history to it, but like that thing has been around since like the 1700s, and players are still like drinking wine out of it after they win the cup. So I will stand by that. I'll die on that hill, thinking that the Stanley Cup is the greatest trophy in terms of looks, history, significance. I just love the look of it. Still have never got to see the Stanley Cup.
Here's your history lesson. Sir Frederick Arthur Stanley
Of
donated the
course.
Stanley Cup in 1892. He
Wow.
was Lord Stanley of Preston and the
Yep.
son of the Earl of Derby. So,
Yeah. The
Pittsburgh
Earl, like,
Sports Castle podcast listeners just got a little dose of history
yeah.
about the Stanley Cup trophy.
Yeah. And that, yeah, absolutely. Whoever gets the Stanley Cup this year, no asterisk. There was no asterisk for the Devils who won it in '95 when that was a lockout shortened season. There was no asterisk for the Blackhawks in 2013 when there was the lockout shortened season. So there should absolutely not be an asterisk for whoever wins it this year. I will find it funny though if it becomes a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning who should have won a Stanley Cup before now. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals in both 2015 and 16 and the finals in 2015. Um, I think that'll be interesting if they win it. That's my prediction right now. Obviously, I want the Penguins to win, but I think the Lightning are going to win it. And there will be fans, not me. There will be fans that'll put an asterisk on it and say that it didn't really count, even though it totally does. So.
And speaking of the Penguins, let's get into the team that we share a Pittsburgh name with. Of course, on the roster, there are 34 players going to the tournament. Nick Bukestad, Dominic Simon, and Zach Trotman are the only 3 players left off of the roster due to
Yeah,
injuries. I've seen Bukestad's name a lot on the injury list, and it just makes me wonder too about his value when it comes to time for re-signing players or putting players
yeah.
on the trade market.
He has another year, I'm pretty sure.
He is another
Yeah.
year. Okay.
Bukestad will have another year till be UFA. And the Penguins, yeah, he's an enigma. I have no idea what's going on with Nick Bukestad. I want him to play good, and I want him to play in general, but he's had an injury-ridden couple of seasons with the Penguins ever since he came over to Florida. He is out with I don't even know. Take your pick if it was lower or upper body. It's not like they're going to reveal what it was. I think it was core muscle surgery, something like that. Dominic Simone, I think he like broke his leg or something, or like his fibula, but that's awful. And it'll be a loss. He was going to be out like 6 months. Those are our 2 only injured players, which is still crazy how we haven't played in a couple months and we're still having injuries. Zach Trotman announced yesterday that he will not go to the hub cities because he doesn't think it's worth it in terms of risking it for his family, and absolutely I can see that. There's 2 parts of that. One, Zach Trotman was probably not going to play, and he probably doesn't want to sit in a hotel and just watch the Penguins play and him just to sit there and risk getting COVID. And 2, he just doesn't want to get COVID and doesn't see worth it. I completely understand his decision there. Other players, while I'm talking about players that have opted out, other players that did it that fall in that same category: Sven Baertschi, Roman Polak, Stefan Camper. Those are like all maybe your 7th or 8th defenseman or your 13th or 14th forward. Mike Green, he would have played though, along with Travis Hamonic. Those are interesting ones to me because those players would have played in the lineup. So they're probably leaning more towards the side of, hey, I don't want my family to be at risk. So that'll be a loss for the Flames and the Oilers. And then Max Domi, Luke Kunin, and Capo Caco all have type 1 diabetes, and they are going to be waiting a 7 to 10 day period before they find out if they are going to decide to opt out or play. So the only Penguin to do it was Trotman, and then Simone and Bukestad are out with injuries. Other than that, the Penguins have 34 players coming to camp. 28. It was supposed to be 28, but I don't understand. Like, apparently the number's 34 now. But I thought the NHL said that there was only allowed to be 28 skaters and as many goalies. The Penguins are bringing all 5 of their goalies: Murray, Jari, DeSmith, Diorio, and Larmy. So we'll have to see what that is. And I think Cody had made a great article about what the Penguins' lines were going to be like, and I agree with that, which we'll get to just right now.
Yeah, Cody's article available on our website predicting the Penguins lines when NHL play resumes. He has for line one, Jake Gensel, Sidney Crosby, Connor Sherry. If I butcher these last names, just let it happen, folks. That's all I gotta
Yeah.
say. Line two, he has Jason Zucker, Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust. Line three, Patrick Marleau, Jared McCann, and Patrick Hornquist. In line four, Zach Aston Reese, Teddy Bluger, Brandon Tanev. And
Yeah.
he's got a few defensive pairings like Chris Letang and Brian Dumoulin, John Marino and Marcus Pedersen, Justin Schultz and Jack Johnson. And he, just like you, has Matt Murray playing over Tristan Jarry. You want to talk
Yeah.
about Cody
I
and
agree.
if
I
you
agree
guys
with
agree?
Cody's lines, and it's what's crazy is that Cody wrote that article like what a month ago, and they still do hold up. Simone. The only problem I see with it is the third line. I don't think Patrick Marleau is a third line player anymore, but you can't separate Aston Reese, Bluger, and Tanev as the fourth line. So I think you're gonna have to put Marleau there. I would have put Simone there if he was healthy, which he's not. So I think Marleau will slide in there. Um, Bukestad and Simone will not, uh, no matter how long the Penguins go into this playoffs, if they do make it to the Stanley Cup final, Simone and Bukestad will not be ready to play. And I could never, they would not return. I couldn't see that happening because they wouldn't have skated in forever. In terms of extra forwards, the Penguins are also bringing Rodriguez, Poulin, Lafferty, Militek, Barone, Adam Johnson, and Anthony Angelo in the forward groups. And then for defensemen, Kevin Churchman, Chad Ruedel, Yuso Ricola, and Pierre-Olivier Joseph. The only player that was kind of like, hey, why didn't he make it was Nathan Legari. Jim Rutherford said that he wasn't ready for the NHL yet. He still hasn't played in the NHL. And I really don't think a player like Poulin or Legari that has never played in the NHL would want their first NHL game to be in a arena with no fans. So I could definitely see Rodriguez getting into the lineup. He could possibly be that third line left wing instead of Marleau. And then in terms of goaltending, I think Murray should start for the time being. And like usually we would go with whatever goaltender's hot. No goaltender's hot right now because we haven't played in a month. So I do agree with Cody's lines for the most part, and we'll just have to see what happens. Hopefully none of our players get hurt or have COVID because that's just going to shuffle up the lines a bunch. So yeah.
You've talked about this a little bit. It is definitely interesting with no fans. I don't know about you, but I have, obviously been watching live sports for a while now, covering the National Women's Soccer League and Major League Soccer. I hate artificial crowd noise.
Yeah, the
I'm
NHL is
not a
supposed
fan
to
of
be
it.
doing that.
Yeah,
They asked season ticket holders to send them like audio for like them cheering and stuff like that. I get it.
I've
You're
seen the
trying. You're
videos of
trying at
like
least. The
cheering.
effort's there, absolutely. But it's not going to be anything like the real thing. So
Yeah, I understand the videos for sure because, they have that up at MLS and NWSL as well. They have it silent, and, players are trained to, block that out and focus on the game in hand so they're
mhm.
not like looking up at the scoreboard like, oh, there's our fans. But like for me as a viewer, especially, I don't know how much talking goes on in hockey. I'm going to assume it's about the same amount as
Oh yeah,
soccer
absolutely.
because of
And
the
yeah,
close proximity.
there's another
But
element in terms of that. A bunch of players are scared that they're going to get caught like swearing and like cussing on air because there's no like crowd to like blur that stuff out, and the cameras will probably pick that stuff up. So
well, it's definitely happened, and I know just for me when I've been watching, these games and stuff, I have enjoyed listening. I don't know if hockey is as technical as soccer, but listening to just like kind of the players' mindsets in a way
Mhm.
has been really, really interesting. And as a fan and as a reporter, I think it's just so very cool to get this kind of candid information from
Yeah.
these athletes. And I think it's really cool. But what do you think it's going to be like with no fans in on the hockey rink?
Well, the Florida Panthers will be the most prepared of this out of anyone because they don't have fans in the first place. But the It's definitely going to be definitely going to be different in terms of what'll happen. The home away thing won't matter pretty much, except for like line changes, because you switch sides of the board or which sides of the boards you have. You have the long change. Um, that's really not going to matter. Like the Boston Bruins will technically be the home seed all throughout the playoffs if they make it like to the Stanley Cup final. But is that really going to matter? You don't have fans there anymore, and you're not even home. You're in Toronto, and then Edmonton. By the way, quick side note: I forgot to mention the Stanley Cup the Stanley Cup final and the conference final will both be played in Edmonton. So once we get to that point of there, it'll be in Edmonton, which is technically, if you look at the numbers, the safer in terms of COVID. But yeah, as in terms of fans, I don't know what you do if you're a team trying to, like create that game-like atmosphere. And that's one of my favorite parts of the Stanley Cup playoffs is the fan atmosphere and the interaction with the fans. Like even when the Penguins played the Nashville Predators in 2017, the finals, like as much as I hated how obnoxious their fans were after Murray let in a goal, it just still brought so much to like the atmosphere and like the experience overall. And we're gonna miss that this year, and it's gonna suck, but it is what it is, and we'll have to cheer on from home. So.
Yeah, for sure. We have talked a lot about this on previous podcasts, and now we're going to talk about it with you. I'm going to intro this a little bit because I have a bit of a rant. I really, really hope that the NHL has looked at what Major League Soccer is doing and says, we're not going to do that. I think you were absolutely right at the beginning of the show whenever you said it's kind of, there's no doubt somebody's going to test positive for COVID. And we've seen a lot of people test positive. We've seen the false positives come out, and then, you get a quick negative and whatnot. But I think that it really comes down to the number of tests, whether it's a false positive or not. If it's positive and you have just a crazy number of teams and players testing positive, I think you need to put a cap on the tournament. I think you need to end it. And I've been screaming about that on Twitter at Major League Soccer. Long story short, FC Dallas had 10 players and coaches test positive. Nashville has had 6 or 7, and both of them have pulled out of the tournament, but they're still in the bubble in Orlando. And now you have players from Sporting Kansas City, and this morning a match with Toronto and DC United had to be postponed to tomorrow because of positive tests. I think that when it comes, I don't know if there's a set number. The numbers of teams in MLS and NHL are obviously different, but I think that NHL needs to look at what's happening with Major League Soccer and come up with a game plan and come up with kind of a cap of, it doesn't matter if it's players, it doesn't matter if it's staff. If X amount of players or staff test positive, we need to end the tournament. No questions asked.
I don't think there's going to be a certain number because I think the NHL wants to push past this. And yeah, money. But I don't know. I don't know what you do. The NHL has confirmed that they will do tests every day, at least once on every single person that goes to the arena and the hotel. And those are pretty much going to be the only major two places that people will be allowed, players and staff members will be allowed to go to. My question is, what happens? Like, we know what happens if a player gets COVID. They will have to self-quarantine, and they will be replaced in the lineup by someone else that can fill their spot. That's why there's 34 players on the Penguins training camp instead of 20, which is a normal roster. What happens if a coach gets it? You don't have a backup coach. Are you just not going to have a coach? What happens if Mike Sullivan gets it, and who coaches? Is Mark Recchi coach as the assistant coach, but now as the overall as the head coach? What happens if that happens in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final? What happens if one of your players what happens if the Conn Smythe winner has COVID and isn't allowed to be at the Stanley Cup Final? I'm just spitballing crazy scenarios, but we never know what's going to happen with both COVID and 2020. So Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen if a coach gets it. That's my main question mark. Um, but NHL, like hockey rosters, they're smaller than football, especially because I forget which college had it, and it just spread like wildfire with a college football team or something like that. I don't remember where it was from, but there was like 30 players that had it. But the NHL has like uh, 20 players on your base roster, so that's like 40 plus the coaches, and then the very select number of media officials. You probably have around like over 100 people still in that arena. So if just one person has it, there you go. Um, yeah, I really don't know what the NHL can do in terms of limiting these numbers. Um, but I think they're doing they have everything in place to at least attempt this. And I don't know if they are going to pull the plug. I don't think Gary Bettman wants to, and because of money.
Yeah, I mean, money talks for sure, and these sponsorships definitely have a big say so in what's going on here, whether it's advertised or not.
And
Just to
everyone's
kind
losing
of,
money now. Everyone's
yeah,
losing money and trying to get it back as quick as possible. Disneyland just opened up, even though Florida is, yeah,
you better
because
stop before I get on a rant.
they're losing money.
Let's
And
see if
yeah,
you have any rants for this. Is there anybody that you would have added on to the Penguins roster or had taken off, or are you pretty content with what they have
yeah,
put out?
I thought it was going to be 28, so I didn't expect players like Philip Barone made it. He actually was traded from. I'm pretty sure he came over in like a minor deal from the Canadians. Sam Militek made it. Okay, if these players play, hopefully that's hopefully they don't because that means players are hurt. I understand bringing all the goaltenders. I understand Zach Trotman's decision to not want to come. Players also, that was the other thing. Tomorrow is the deadline for players, except for the three that I mentioned earlier: Luke Kunin, Capo Caco, and Max Domi, who have type 1 diabetes. Um, Tomorrow is the deadline for players to opt out. So if none of the Penguins, no more of the Penguins, Zach Trotman is the only one right now. If none of the Penguins opt out, that'll be the roster that we have so far, and hopefully no one does. God forbid Jake Gensel opts out, and oh boy. Um, but yeah, I'm satisfied with the roster that we have. I don't know what'll happen. Um, I don't know what the lines will look like, but that's really not what I'm like concerned about right now. I just want to play hockey. I'm like, I don't care if we have a first line of like Militek, Barone, and Sam Lafferty. I just want to play hockey. I miss it so much.
You're jonesing. You're definitely jonesing. To give me
Yeah.
some predictions. What do you think's happening? Who you mentioned who you have winning, but let's get some predictions going on here.
I have no idea what's going to happen in the round robin because I don't know what the round robin is really. The teams, those top teams. So I'm not even going to go into that. Who knows what will happen there? Boston will probably come out on top. Whatever. Uh, Screw it. I'll go through all of them. Chicago, Edmonton. There's who I want to win and who I think it'll win. I want Edmonton to win. I think Edmonton will win too. If Chicago wins, that'll suck because they do not deserve. They did not deserve to be in the playoffs technically. Vancouver, Minnesota. I want it to be Vancouver. I think it'll be Vancouver. Winnipeg, Calgary. I think Winnipeg will take that in terms of goaltending, and I want Winnipeg to win too. Arizona, Nashville. Arizona doesn't have enough playoff success and experience. The only person on that roster who has won a Stanley Cup goes by the name of Philip Kessel. Philip J. Kessel. I love him, and I miss him so much. But I do not think they can pull that off. And Alex Woligoski, also former Penguin, has a Stanley Cup, and this one on the Coyotes. So I think Nashville takes that one. In the East, the Islanders, Panthers. Panthers also do not have enough playoff success. Not really the Islanders do, but they swept the Penguins last year, so I can't say anything. I think the Islanders will take that one. Columbus, Toronto. I think Columbus wins it. I think Toronto doesn't even make the playoffs this year, technically. I would love to see that happen because I hate the cocky Toronto uh, fans that think they are going to win a Stanley Cup every year, even though they have no defense. So I think even though Columbus is technically one of Pittsburgh's rivals, kind of rivals, they're like our sixth biggest rival. So even though they think they're our first, I'm rooting for Columbus in that series. So to take out the Leafs. Rangers, Hurricanes. I think it's going to be the Rangers. I do not want it to be the Rangers because they did not deserve to make the playoffs, and I want Carolina to win. Because Carolina has a very good roster and they loaded up at the deadline. And then that leaves us to Montreal, Pittsburgh. I think the Penguins sweep them. I think the team that the Penguins have right now is just going to train wreck the Montreal Canadiens in terms of talent, overall experience in the playoffs, and determination. Sidney Crosby wants to play, man. He's just going to go out there and snipe someone on Carey Price. Carey Price is the only chance that they have of winning this series. And if Max Domi doesn't play, who is one of their best players, they don't have a chance, in my opinion. And I know I say that as a biased Yinzer, but let's go Pens. I'm just so excited to get started.
We'll let it pass since it's your first show. We'll give you the green light on that one. Do you have anything else to add about the tournament, about the Penguins?
I'm just excited. I miss hockey, man, so much. Yeah, it didn't end the way we wanted to, but we'll see what happens. Like, even the little things like that you look forward to in the summer, like in the NHL, like free agency and like deadline to sign college free agents, that didn't happen this year. So I'm ready to get things going again. Like even the littlest bit of information that I see on Twitter, like just excites me because like I don't know. Game 1 between the Canadians and the Penguins will be August 1st. We still have no idea what time, but there will be 5 games on August 1st. So that's the date to look forward to right now.
And we definitely look forward to your coverage. We have a lot of stuff coming up. It is, it's hard right now to find content because there's not much happening. I'm going to have a piece, this is going to air on Monday, July 13th. We're going to have some Riverhounds coverage, of course, through the tournament. We're going to have some previews when it comes to the Penguins and the Pirates because they are coming back as well. We're hoping to get Antonio on the next show to talk about the Pirates, but follow us on Twitter at PGH Sportscastle. You can follow Owen at OCreps85. You can follow Let's Talk Pitt, which is where Cody posts a lot of his stuff and has a lot of really good content. And then I'm just at Rachel Krieger, 2 A's, not 1. We are on all major platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to check us out by searching our name, PGH Sportscastle Podcast. We're also on Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and of course Spreaker, where we record our shows. Listeners, if you have any ideas for podcast prompts and topics, feel free to reach out to members of our team and our Pittsburgh Sportscastle Twitter to send some ideas along. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. For Owen and myself, have a good night.